Hi, now that you've finished putting the tissue depth markers on the skull and sized them appropriately, and you've put the eyeballs in the orbits according to the conventions we discussed, the next thing to do is to render out some images of the skull from two views that you can use as a reference for sketching out what you think the face may have been like. Now, we're going to use that as a tool for modeling in 3D later on, but really some people would stop at that stage and work up a more refined sketch of the face for distribution to the public. You don't have to work up the face quite to that extent, and I know not everybody here is an artist, so you just have to work out the details of the face as well as you can as a guide for modeling down the road. So there are a few things we have to do to get set up, and you can see I've got my skull here with the tissue depth markers in place. Just like in the last tutorial, they're not really properly placed and oriented and scaled yet, but for the purposes of this tutorial, it serves as an okay example, and the eyes are in place. So the first thing we're going to want to do is excuse me, add I think on your skull you got sort of a gray color for the skull, and that should be fine. If you wanted to change to another color, you can just select the skull. If you can't select it for some reason, you may want to look over in your display layers and turn off reference in this box. You can select all parts of your skull. In your case, if you just select any part, the mandible or the cranium, and hit the up arrow on your keyboard, it'll select both of them. In my case, it's a little bit different. But if you want to add a lighter colored material to your object, you can just select it and right-click. Go down here to Assign New Material and select a blend. And this will pop up, and you can change the color here, so you can lighten it up a little bit if you want. I'm going to undo that and just go back to the way I had it before. You can do that with the jaw too. So the next thing we want to do is create a reference scale object. If we look in one of these other views here, you can see we're working in certain units. Each one of these grid squares is actually registered to 1 centimeter square. So when we create this image, we want to have a reference object that tells us what 1 centimeter is, so we can line up the two images and make sure they're calibrated to each other. So the easiest way to do that is to simply create a cube. So we're going to go to Create, Polygon Primitive. Make sure this interactive creation is turned off so the check mark's not selected. And just go to Cube. You'll see a little cube is created here in my world. And I am just going to move it to a good location so it'll appear in the renders but not get in the way of the skull. So if I pop into the side view here and go to W for move mode, I'm just going to move it sort of out of the way here. And if I go into the front view, you can see it wouldn't appear if I rendered the image from here, so I'm going to move it just somewhere like this. So it's not going to get in the way, but it'll serve as a good reference. And let's give it a different color. So select it, right click on it, and go down to Assign New Material, and just select Lambert here. And just dial down the color to black. So it just appears a black square. But because it's a cube, it'll appear as a black square in both renders. Now, I'm talking about these two views because these are the views we're going to render from, the side and front orthographic views. What orthographic is a view that's not like a human view, it's more like an architectural drawing because it doesn't include any perspective distortion. So even if this cube were 1,000 miles away in the distance, it would still appear the same size. There's no size change due to perspective. So we get a nice flat reference image that we can draw on. So there are a couple other things we have to do. So we're going to render from this view like this, and from this view like this. But so for both of these views, we want to render out with a white background. So to do that, we'll have to do this in both panels. Go to View, Camera Attribute Editor. You should get a window like this. Scroll down to get to Environment and change the background color to white. Do that over here too. View, Camera Attribute Editors, background color to white. Let's do a quick render here. So we're getting the skull against the white background with our little square showing us what 1 centimeter is. Okay, now this is a small render. It's only 640 by 480 pixels. We want to do something a little bit bigger. So we have to change the render settings. Just close this. And if you go up here to, this is called the status bar, to this little picture of a clapboard with 2 dots beside it, this is where we change our render settings. So open this, and under the Common tab, scroll down and change the image size preset to, let's just say 1K square. 1K is 1,000 pixels on the side. So actually let's make it 2K square. So that's 2048 pixels on the side. So let's give us a nice, fairly high resolution image that we can trace over later. Go back up to the top here, and the image format here is my IFF. We can just leave that alone for now, but go over to Maya Software tab, and then just under Quality, just click on the drop-down menu and go to Production Quality. Now the last thing we have to do in both of these windows, under View, go down to Camera Settings, to Resolution Gate. You can see here in my window there are these green lines, and this is the part of our viewport that will be rendered. So we want to zoom in to get the skull to fill up most of that space. You know, making sure we don't cut off anything important. This is shown here. Pop over to the front view, do the same thing. View, Camera Settings, Resolution Gate turned on. See, maybe you can't, it's a little difficult to see, but there are green lines here. And kind of zoom in. And we don't have to worry about getting them exactly the same height, because we can take the rendered images into Photoshop and fix that up later. And now all we have to do is do 2 renders. And to do a render, you go back up to the status line and click on this clapboard here. And it will... Okay, it's done. Now we want to save this image as a file. So in this render view window here, go to File, Save Image, and you want to put it in your renders folder. Mine's actually on my local machine. It should be going to the right spot. Yep, and change it from my IFF to a TIFF. That's just a different type of file. And give it a appropriate name. Done, and close that. And then pop over to this view and do the same thing. Just render. Okay, and that's done too, so we do the same thing. File, Save Image. There we side. Again, make sure you change it to a TIFF. Save. Close that window and we're done. And I'll see you in the next video when we line these up in Photoshop. Thanks.